Alrighty. Good evening to those of you who are in Australia, afternoon to those of you who are in some afternoon part of the world, and morning to anybody who is in my part of the world or on the same time zone. We are going to be talking about basic income, obviously, and transformations, and we have three presentations over the next 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of conversation and questions. So without further ado, I'm going to go to our first presenter, Mu-Jeong. Could you please come off of mute, Mu-Jeong, and prepare to speak? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll start from here. Okay, I'll start. In the contemporary socioeconomic inequality and the poverty, different capitalism, major adaptation is essential. The fundamental challenge is institutional. Past institution not proper and need greater period experimentation, basic income. This is why we should look at institutional theory economics and Marxist and post-Keynesian tradition out of the dominant neoliberal consensus. However, the weakness to change the consensus is a weak connection to radical theory, especially Vivan planning, on the issue how basic income can truly act as a trigger for self-organizing. New legend system for justice, which leads to sub-question. First, as shown in figure 3, Marxism has no micro foundation in relation to how capital system food is organized as structurally related, and even micro foundation matter, but their connection to real classical, so fail to recognize the micro foundation from substance radical. Last, the post-structured Marxism has a micro foundation, such as habitus, possibly equivalent to Bavarian planning concepts and habit, but fail to apply to real world objectivity in systematic manner. This different perspective, micro foundation, leads to different perspective on the origins of the capital food system, as shown in figure 3. The third problem is related to whether the issue how basic income act as a trigger for self-organization is meaningless or not, because individual economic actors do not need to know exactly the contribution of basic income to regulate the macro levels of the capitalist food system. And also, because the Marxist theories crafted the capitalist food system, but it fails to recognize that capitalist structure is born, develop, and die, and undermining a self-generating experimental movement from collective actors such as basic income. So weakly connected to the issue of self-organization, proper institutional variation, as is shown in figure 4, market versus non-market, and pro-capital versus anti-capital. The first issue is the fragmentation into an answer to the question whether or not basic income is truly at the trigger for self-organization, such as yes, no, not sure, with different reasons, which lead to us last question, if not truly, what is the solution? As there is a fragmentation such as reformists to look at basic income as temporal, short-term supplement to make a capital active for the system work better, while radical look basic income as a long-term substitute beyond such a capital food system by reclaiming an evolution. Of course, there's ones who think the question is a political, non-scientific, and understanding matter, so not to decide which side the fancy stands on. So by combining those issues, this paper tried to answer to by sub-question by different standard Babylon planning with case study of Korea. For microfoundation, they will use the anthropological concept of instinct and habit, which to planning has the radical substance properties out of neoclassical economics conception to homo economicus rationality. Instinct is divided into workmanship predation, influence the human behavior, which is divided into one's justified technical knowledge and habit of thought. As human behavior as subjectivity is organized and structured, divided into institution technology in objectivity, real world, while agro-technology promotes material progress, well-being, institution promoted ideology, penalty, prevalent hierarchy system. So institution private property radically reflected business as usual, ceremonial habits, thinking, treating family as charter, personal property, which expresses basic conflict against the workmanship good for social progresses. These institutional approaches can be radically connected to Korea's capitalist system food in pre-COVID time, which is structured to business industry food production sphere, which means private property institution is based on predated exploitation of permanent workers, which served radicals the social classes, structured industry business representing workmanship predations. The complex workplace is not because of moral health of individual capitalists, but rather institutional problem within radical structure in Korea. This class struggle, which take a mutual sabotage property, which between business industry is now relevant to Korean cases, where as shown in figure 5, non-farmers ownership dramatically increased to 48.1%, now close to farmers ownership. Farmers and workers struggle against the race discrimination, overwork, and the work-life balance is matched to constitutional equal employment, work-family balance law. But business out of the request organize their own trust cartel for non-agriculture, either farmland, increasing prices with the disposal of harvest agro-food by the name of the private property law, to list a few. Applicable time in South Korea, so such capital system is private property treating farmland as chapter, not fictitious community, is originally sold in Korea capital food system out of land to tillers principle based on constitutional law and farmland act. Also, as Vivan said, if the agri-food system is the most striking index of the cultural, community cultural level, it's worth to reference to next two figures. This figure showed that while ownership by non-farmers increased to 48.1% nationwide, food grain for self-support decreased from 8.85% in 1975 to 20.2% in 2020. Also, this figure showed that Korea's ratio of self-support is nearly 5 times lower than the OECD countries. Then, in crisis COVID-19, how basic income act as a trigger for self-organization for of the institutional variation market versus non-market and pro-capital and anti-capital, where benevolent planning ideas can be connected for aspect listed in the slide. This shows that Korea is lowest not only to confirm the COVID-19 cases per million people, but also government additional spending, including agriculture subsidy in response to COVID-19 2021, especially blue-collar countries experimenting or practicing basic income. And this figure showed in Korea increased its agriculture subsidies 6.6%, but still much lower than OECD EU, especially blue-collar countries experiment or practicing basic income. And furthermore, as shown in this figure, Korea's ratio of the agriculture to whole GDP per capita decreased to 1.8%, more than 2 times lower than world average. Now it's closer to some blue-collar countries apparently practicing basic income, which lead to, as shown in this figure, Korea's ratio of agricultural employment in whole decreased to 4.5% in 2021. Now closer to especially blue-collar countries experimenting or practicing basic income. The first government, like Marx post-Keynesian, Vivan planning argument, constitutional government is a business government to enforce private property and its privilege is still valid in Korea, where it's shown in figure 9.1, decreasing budget for agri-food from 4.3% to 2.9% in 2020, which is even used good for private profit good, private for profit, particularly such as not only unmanned smartphone innovation, but more importantly, agriculture direct payment system, as shown in figure 9.2, unlike a basic income system initiative based on permanent scale, not human, which in turn could only for non-farm absentee landlord, as not universally conditionally given to tenant farmers based livelihood security. So in COVID-19, emergency basic income considered necessary but as a temporal, non-regular supplement, not a substitute of an established selective, non-universal conditional agri-food security system, which made the basic income insufficient to act as a trigger. Second, investment. Business enterprise investment often determined intentional sabotage as intentional rewards efficiency, invest in quantity of basic income supplement scheme like Schoenhals land cases to depressing wages rather than quality of their working condition is still valid when applied in Korea, which invest government additional agricultural dynamic payment system into quantity of non-agricultural more than agricultural one, including advertising, while practicing disposal of the harvest of agri-food for price stabilization, and also even being agricultural thing, mainly for GMO food, as shown in figure 10.1 and 10.2, rather than quality of employment as shown in figure 8.4, and also quality of working condition. So in COVID-19, emergence basic income is necessary but in temporary supplement as not substitute the established agro-food system, which make it an advantage basic income to act a trigger to depressing wages. This can be seen Figure 10.3 rapidly increases GMO support and use as pesticide in chemical fertilizer, ranked top in the world. But also, as shown in Figure 10.4, increased food prices at 12.6% is much higher than economic wage growth is 4.0%, 5 times higher than OECD. Third, heterogeneous quality different livelihood based on types of consumption instrument conspicuous competitive one is applied to Korea when emergence basic income acted to increase the instrument consumption, particularly bottom 20% of income. Despite of increasing product prices, as shown in figure 11.1, but also increasing the particular pent-up or revenge consumption due to chronic discontent present, which lead to increasing engagement coefficient, as shown in figure 11.1, 11.2. But emerging basic income as taken to temporal, non-regular supplement is not sufficient to act a trigger to reduce structural food insecurity, as shown in these two figures. There is still big structural gaps in food security on household by income level. And last, self-regulated markets, the fundamentalist economist ideology make basic income to act as a temporal supplement and not substitute, with the fiscal skeptical rhetoric of the perversity, futility, and jeopardy thesis, which lead to advocating free trade in the situation of food as a weapon, or freedom to choose whether one can eat a substandard food at a lower price if not sick and die, and the limited role agriculture in future into leisure or tourism rather than stable food supply, as shown in figure 12.1. And second, pro-capitalist patriotism, like what is good for profit food companies owned by Korean big business is good for Korea, which lead to now trending toward wider acceptance of GMO food, as shown in figure 20.2, while taking basic income supported by 60% as populism harmed the nations. And lastly, nationalist bill to emerging basic income benefit the population of minor as reverse discrimination to the poor in Korea. Such ideology acted mental morphine to make the farm workers forget their importance of basic income and the workmanship. So, basic income in short term can act as a trigger for self-organization, but per capita way in the figure 4 is adopting the basic income as supplement to support the previous private property institution treating permanent charter out of lender to tillers principle, which lead to trolley dilemma, locking the trigger for the new legend system food justice. So as in figure 13, how to expect a sustainable resilience in the long-term future, as like a case of the spin-on-land cases. This conclusion is based on first the truth philosophical value judgment, right or wrong, which means as long as such an investor forming institution ownership treating permanent charter out of lender to tillers principle continues, this content will continue, as shown in figure 13, how to predict any peaceful order. This truth can be also approached in history as fact, and Taiwan is deeply in the monopolistic neoliberalism, increasing disparity of life expanded by income, as shown in figure 13. So basic income triggers for new legend systems to food security when a connected radical region, which is shown in figure 17, like radical tonic curves are upside down anti-capital manner, as shown in figure 4, as pathway to a separate directing counter movement for re-embedding society in the biosphere toward sustainable resilient food justice and sovereignty, and Delta struggle, and universal basic income out of the pre-capitalist rhetoric reactions based on poverty, perversity, futility of jeopardy thesis, rather than the promise on making the capitalist institution ownership structures work better. This connection basic income radical vision can be only truly connected to radical forces that practice first the counter movement is radical adaptation and anti-capital process with critical approaches to substance structured product system. Second, let's properly walk into common principle of the universal basic income, not taken to supplement it together with smallholder and public farming initiative. And third, open to exotic, entirely noble entrance out of product caves is Korea. And also lastly, allow universal basic income common principle of equality, equity, and liberation of a food system. So this is my conclusion. We can see my abstract as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfectly timed, I might add. That was exactly 15 minutes. So many thanks for what was an interesting, complex paper, and certainly one that I think would benefit from detailed reading. We'll move on to the next presenter now, who is, I believe, Valerija Korosec. Valerija, would you like to take the floor?
I would love to. Can we move to my presentation, or do I have to do it by myself?
Do that for you. Here we are. There we go. Thank you.
So thank you. I'm very happy to be here, although it's almost the end of it. But in a way, I believe this is perfect timing for this presentation. This presentation has three parts. First one is pre-COVID time, then is COVID time, and then the current time, which is actually this basic income conference. I would like to say that, first of all, I have only 13 slides. So it's not going to be so in-depth as my previous speaker. But I would like to say that what I did in the last 10 years is a lot of connected with basic income movement in Slovenia, in Europe, and I might say in the world as well. I'm presenting basic income movement from Slovenia, which I might say that we were like the bright star of the eastern countries of EU and even EU. We were twice second in European Basic Income Initiative. And we might ask ourselves, is that pure luck, or what was behind that? In our opinion, this success was followed with our work in the last 10 years. I can present it in like three different time slots. First one was when we managed to organize the basic income network in Slovenia. And that was also connected with the first and only basic income proposal in Slovenia. The second part was Slovenia joining European Basic Initiative movement. And then we connected with people in Europe. And the third part, it's like when we started to look around the world, we saw Korea, the big steps approaching toward basic income. We had a big hopes. What is coming out of all this movement? I would like to say also what was the major success in Slovenia in the first part. We connected really good academics, advocates, media, even political parties, NGOs, and public servants. We could say it was like magic circle. And that's why we were so successful even in reaching the public vote on basic income ideas. Basic income idea was in all polls more than majority of the people who knew what basic income is, they were for basic income. But then let us ask what we showed them. We showed them the basic principles. So we taught them about basic principles of a basic income idea. And we started to talk about the difference, about equality, equity, justice, and so on. But we were not so much inclined to go in that direction. Then it has to be said that the basic income proposal for Slovenia, which was written in 2010, was almost ideal. I mean, how much I could follow the micro simulations and proposal designs in the last few days, I haven't seen one that would be better of this one, I could say. In the meaning, how many points, criteria, it was well done. And the main point was that we tried and succeed to point out that budget neutral model, which is also good for lower poverty rates of children or the elders and so on, is very, very feasible. So we were so much successful and happy about public opinion in favor of basic income that we are took quite by surprise what happened during COVID time. And this is like my second part, in which I would like to point out that in COVID time, some named this basic income as emergency basic income. In Slovenia, we got five different schemes. It was basic income for self-employed, basic income for church people. Then it was tourist voucher for all people, first and second one. And then it was a digital voucher for young people and digital voucher for old people. The main point I would like to do or make right now is this, that none of the schemes names basic income was not close to what we are talking about in our community. What I would like to say is that we were so successful that the government people took our name label of basic income, and because they knew that people like it and they are in favor, they just use it for their own schemes. What happened then is that, of course, those, for instance, basic income for self-employed is very much conditional. And right now, in these hard times, people are paying it back. That's the first problem. Then it showed that tourist voucher, which was very conditional, not in who is getting it, but how it has to be used, was also so complicated that only privileged people could use it. I mean, all those schemes showed us how really good idea the true basic income is. But then, of course, it showed us also how a good idea can be misused by the wrong people. And now we are questioning how to get further. Well, the first suggestion is that we are thinking about using basic income idea as the main point, as a philosophy, as a new paradigm. And we are going in direction of talking about universality in any public scheme. So we are talking about universal basic services, universal basic items, talking about energy or water. Then we are talking about universal basic job. And when we are talking about jobs, we are strong in favor in the shorter working week and so on. So we are making the basic income idea as a basis of the political social system. Here is one idea. It's the suggestion I did for the government, how we have to approach energy poverty problem. And it was like that we have to make 3 pillars. One is universal, the second is the usual one, and then the democratic one. The democratic one is connected with what we heard in the previous session about reciprocity, about social scores, about participation. Democratically set up rules. It's the point when we can talk how much one job is worthwhile to be paid or appreciated and which one not. But nonetheless, beside that, it has to be the first basic pillar, which is universal, unconditional, individual. And my approach, I would suggest for our community is this, that we are separating it and not mixing basic income idea as a human right with the incomes that are derived from the work and labor. I would just like to point out that in our work, we really have to learn from our success and failure, and think about what can bring us further on in our goal, which is not implementing basic income, but it is to secure basic security for everyone. It's not important in what kind of scheme is, what's the name of it. Important is that everyone in the society can feel appreciated and valuable part of the society. What I would like to suggest is that in this post-COVID time, we really have to be careful and think it over. What happened to our concept? Who misused it? What the name stands for? I mean, I know that we are talking about definition of it and the new definition, but maybe we have to think like that what was done in basic income society community last 30 years was very well meant to mend up and to help that modern society works. But maybe we will have to go over it and think what kind of society, what kind of schemes we need for post-industrial, post-COVID times, post-Ukraine war times, and maybe we have to start with this magic circle again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valerija. Another absolutely impeccable example of timing. Much appreciated. That was 14 minutes, in fact, so a minute shorter. We'll move on to our third presenter. Vivian, are you there? Oh, I beg your pardon. We have a video. Okie dokie. So we do have a presentation from Vivian and from Martin, but they pre-sent theirs, so I'm going to select it now. Play video with video audio. Okay, folks, here we go.
Welcome to our working group turning crisis into utopia by rethinking the economy and work. I am Vivan Storlund, a lawyer living in Amsterdam,
And I am Marty Schoenhals. I'm a cultural anthropologist living in Western North Carolina.
I'm so happy to be joined by an anthropologist, because in this way we can use an interdisciplinary approach to our topic. So we want to show how crisis could be turned into utopia with a universal basic income by rethinking the economy and work. There is abundant research that such a utopian view could become a reality. But the main challenge is to change our perception from an economic and utilitarian view that at its extreme sees the emergence of a class of economically useless people when conventional jobs are gone. And that we want to substitute with a humanistic one, where focus is placed on freely chosen activities and the joy we take in engaging in them. In his book, Envisioning Real Utopias, Erik Olin Wright boils the road to real utopias down to democratic, egalitarian, social empowerment. And this is our roadmap. We are here faced with two separate spheres. Perhaps the greatest challenge of all is one that concerns all of us: to change our perception of the economy and work. And here Martin's anthropologist perspective can help us become aware of our prejudices and potentials, whereas I focus on research findings that have the empowering potential. In the latter cases, political will is required, which means putting politicians, legislators to work. But Marty, how do you look at how we should change our perception?
Well, I think that changing our perception of work is really key. There's no reason that work has to be the obligatory means by which we receive our subsistence. And in fact, as more and more work becomes automated and as work becomes more efficient, which in fact it should and is, then work no longer needs to be exchanged for the necessities of life. Then we have an abundance that allows us to make work non-obligatory. If we work because we choose to do so, work becomes creative, work becomes humanitarian, and work becomes egalitarian. Egalitarian in the sense that there's no one above us forcing us to work as a boss or making us work and checking whether or not we work. Work becomes more like a kind of pleasure. It always surprised me that there aren't more people who look at the nature of work and critique the nature of work. That's something that really needs to be done. Work needs to be something that brings us pleasure, something that brings us community, so that we work in community rather than working in a competitive environment, and work needs to be seen as pleasurable. One of the things that's very, very important is for us to work in community and also to work with an audience of people who can enjoy and appreciate our creative endeavors. And that would happen if the economy, rather than providing us with work in the conventional sense, if the economy became a means to providing us with an audience of people who would be an audience for our creative endeavors. What I envision is groups of people who would be creative groups, and these groups would perform for other groups of people, and then they would take turns, so there would be a kind of reciprocity of performance between audience and performers. One group would perform for the audience, and then they would switch roles. I envision that the economy would provide a modest amount of money so that people could travel to other groups and exchange their kinds of creative experiences with other people. This kind of face-to-face interaction between people that crosses nation-state borders could help to make the world into a place of small-scale, face-to-face encounters rather than one in which the nation-state is an imagined and therefore very toxic kind of outline.
I really enjoy your views on the relation between work and community, and your observation that communities comes from having an audience for one's creative impulses. And I think this is of utmost importance because of our need to rid ourselves from the notion of work as employment, to instead give space for freely chosen activities. And I also like your notion of extending the context beyond the nation state, to replace it with spheres of human interaction. Isn't this already happening very much in the academic and creative sectors, and also in civil society? And I think this conference is a good example of that. Mm-hmm. But now, too many of us are burdened with applications to be able to do this work, conditioned and obstructed by a number of gatekeepers, and burdened by a heavy control apparatus. So here, really, I think this is a great idea.
Thank you.
And now I will then go to the more mundane questions, but still very important, of research that can pave the way for a universal basic income. And I will here single out 3 proposals that, from different perspectives, contribute to our roadmap of democratic, egalitarian social empowerment. The British economist Jeff Crocker has developed an economic model documented in his book with the explanatory title Basic Income and Sovereign Money, the Alternative to Economic Crisis and Austerity Policy. This is a book from 2020. And his model is motivated by the effects that technological change has had on the economy and working life, which we have been talking about. Crocker stresses that his proposal requires a radical rethink and economic system re-engineering. He observes that what is specific in his model as compared to other contemporary new approaches is that he brings together 2 ideas, basic income and sovereign money. And his model is underpinned by a 3-year research project at the Institute for Policy Research at the University of Bath in the UK. And then social citizenship is a model that has been presented for a transformed working life. This was a promising move in the European Union at the turn of the millennium. A group of lawyers and economists led by the French legal scholar Alain Suppion was invited, and I cite, to conduct a prospective and constructive survey on the future of work and labor law within a community-wide intercultural and interdisciplinary framework. This resulted in a publication, Transformation of Labor and Future of Labor Law in Europe, from 1999. The committee saw the idea of a social citizenship as synthesizing the objectives of reforming labor law and social law in general. This report could have paved the way for a basic income, but unfortunately, politicians were not ready to act upon it then. But it's never too late because the report is there in the EU archives. Then the third challenge is how we measure economic performance, the gross domestic product, GDP. And it is a question that requires radical rethinking. And here, promising work has been done, proposing that we change the focus of the statistics from economic production to factors affecting the well-being of today's and future generations. Behind this proposal is the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi Commission that in 2009 presented a report on the measurement of economic performance and social progress. This report was followed up by a high-level group hosted by the OECD that presented a report with the title Beyond GDP, measuring what counts for economic and social performance. And this report is from 2018. And these two reports show how misleading GDP is for the measurement of people's well-being.
There are some seeds of hope, and one of them is what you have just mentioned, the GDP rethinking, because GDP, in being made to include other things besides paid work that's part of the economy, can be seen to emphasize the fact that work is more than just paid activity that gives us the means of subsistence. I think that change in reconceptualizing what the GDP is and what output really is one step, and a fairly major step, because it really is going to the heart of the economics profession and having them rethink what work is.
Mm. Yeah, so we have to repeatedly bring these questions to the fore. Yeah, I think step by step, we will hopefully come closer to political readiness to act.
I think so too. It's so nice to meet other people who are thinking in the same way.
Yeah, and I think this is so wonderful because this is the potentials of the digital age.
Yes.
There are no boundaries.
Yes.
So for me to be able to find all these thinkers who think in similar ways as me has been such a great thing.
Yes, yes. And as you say, we're able to be brought together by the digital age in a way that wouldn't have been possible only a few years ago.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So that's why I was so happy also when you mentioned this replacing the nation state by the communities, the global communities.
Yes.
And a very interesting thing, I think this is also a very good example of perception, because when I was reflecting on what you said about education and communities and audiences, I realized that's what we have. Only today we are dependent on funding to be able, but we have to be able to do these sort of contacts, but yeah, they are there, and with the goodwill of a universal basic income and
yes,
and less control over what we want to do through funding, the funding system. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that a basic income is a first start towards moving toward rethinking activities and giving real value to those activities that aren't paid.
So this is our toolkit for turning crisis into utopia by rethinking the economy and work.
I beg your pardon. I've been talking to myself with the microphone on mute. That's the end of the 3 presentations, all perfectly to time. So thank you to everybody. The question now is, are there any questions? I'm looking at the list of submitted questions, and to date, there are none. So I just want to open the floor, either to panelists to ask questions of each other, or to those in the audience to submit a question here in the questions box that I can then have our panelists respond to.
Love to comment on Vivian and her friend movie presentation.
Please do.
Well, I would like to connect their thoughts about the labor and work in the future. And in that sense, I would like to connect that with my presentation. You know, we were all the time bumped with the question, who will work if we get basic income? But actually the question was really, who will work bullshit job? You know, because everyone would like to have a job full of fulfillment and happy job, like Vivian and Fran talked. And the people actually don't believe that it's possible to have a world where any and each job is full of fulfillment. And then here comes my proposal. You know, I'm saying each person has to do something what is necessary, maybe a repetitory bullshit job, a part of my life, and then a part of my life has to be work in the competitive settings at the trade and market system, and then there is the third pillar where community decides which job is socially valuable and the people would like to work. I believe this kind of approach is like flipping around the basic income community approach toward work. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian, would you like to react or respond? It's possible that Vivian is not actually here. No problem. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Participants or audience? I'm going to...
Thank you.
Vivian, there you are. Excellent. Please.
Comment well taken.
It's possible that Vivian is not actually here.
But can you hear me?
No problem. Any other questions or comments from anybody? I can hear you. I think that you might be playing the live stream as well as being inside the back end. I think it would be best if you shut the live stream and then you can hear in real time what we're saying to each other. Vivian, there you are. Excellent. Please.
Comment well taken.
It's possible that Vivian is not actually here.
But can you hear me?
No problem. Any other questions or comments from anybody? I can hear you. I think that you might be playing the live stream as well as being inside the back end. I think it would be best if you shut the live stream and then you can hear in real time what we're saying to each other. Vivian, there you are. Excellent. Please.
Comment well taken.
It's possible that Vivian is not actually here.
But can you hear me?
No problem. Are you there? Have we fixed this problem? See you, but I don't know what's going on Vivian's end. There appears to be both a delay and a repetition.
I take the floor again because we have time and filming.
Yes, please.
You see, I would like to go back to the definition, and I said we have to rethink everything. You see, we are talking about cash. What about cashless society? We are talking about budget necessary to implement and pay out basic income. What about stateless society? What about the society where the states are incompetent of doing anything because multi corporations took over? And then we are talking about work. What about workless society? So I really think that we got at some kind of end after 30 years where Philip Van Parijs and Anne Miller and all of them started, and that we really have to think it over what we got from our basic income idea and community. What I would like to say is we did everything and we failed. I mean, we showed them that it's easy. So it's easy for them to do stupid things. We showed them that it's budget neutral. And they are saying, people, well, don't worry, it's budget neutral. I mean, we are saying it's so simple. So they're doing is as it really is simple, but it's not. You know, in our country, young guys at the Ministry of Social Affairs are pouring money, like just give each children 50 pounds or whatever. I mean, we made it sound so simple, but actually it's not. And I believe this is a really huge problem. And we got to this finding when we actually got to the stopping line. You know, we introduced basic income, but it's not what we wanted. And I think this is a really like a good end for this wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a troubling, concerning, and questioning end for this conference. That it certainly is. Is there anyone who would like to react to this potential ending? I'm checking in the chat to see if there are any participants responding. There are not. Well, in that case, that will be the final word. And I'll allow us to finish early. Thank you to everybody who presented. Thank you, Valerie, for your interventions at the end. I wish everybody a fine rest of your days. If you're down under, enjoy the rest of the night. And if you're anywhere else, enjoy what remains. Thank you to all of our presenters and to the participants who stayed up until this point. Toodles.